For the ones who don't know me, I'm Stefan. I'm leading the YM Heidelberg base in the Netherlands, so that's exciting. But tonight I have the privilege of hosting a couch session. Couch session is simply actually just a conversation, which I will be having up here with some people. But you guys can join. You guys can join because Jonathan, there, will at certain time also go around with a mic, and you guys can join in the conversation with asking a question. Not all the times are all the questions very relevant or very fitting at the moment, but we'll just give us grace to find out a way to deal with that, because we cannot filter here live, but okay. But good to say, we're going to talk about some relevant topics, sometimes a bit spicy. But the things being said tonight are not necessarily the points of view of YWAM or the statements YWAM declares from now on will be forever the truth. Amen, amen. That's a disclaimer indeed. It's really a conversation, and with opinions of people, with just experiences of people. So, yeah. So the first talk, I'm gonna ask Scott Sotomayer and Wilrens Hornstra on the couch with me. Give them a hand. So, welcome, guys. And we're going to talk about deconstructing faith. And this is kind of, for some already, a spicy topic already, because, yeah, we hear, maybe you hear it also on Facebook, on Instagram, you hear and read stories about people renouncing their faith. We hear that a young generation is rising up where more and more people leave church. We hear well-known Christian figures saying hey, actually, I renounce my faith or whatsoever. And that's quite like, when I read those things, that's quite like, ooh, those come in, you know? Like that's hitting, like, yeah, that does something to us, right? And there might be even people here whom, for example, own children said goodbye to their faith. Might be. So we also want to treat it with respect and dignity. But it is something I think it's good to talk about. So first of all, we're just going to keep it light. Can you guys introduce yourselves a bit? So who are we dealing with? Scott, starting with you.
Well, I'm Scott. Just so you know, I got off the phone with YWAM earlier, and they did say that they agreed with everything that I say today. No, but I work in Northern Ireland in a base called Ancuin in a town called Rostrevor. I'm the base leader there.
All right.
Some homies out there.
Yes, some fans there. All right. Wilrens?
Yes, I'm from Holland. Francesca and I, we host people for intensive debriefings. And I do quite a bit of teaching in our Bible courses and also part of the team that coordinates the Biblical Studies Circle in Europe, or just our network of people working with Bible courses and other Bible programs.
And where are you located?
We're in Germany, south of Germany, edge of the Black Forest.
All right, cool. So we're going to talk about this term, deconstructing faith. And honestly, like, maybe, especially when you have English not as your first language, like, what do we talk about when we talk about deconstructing faith? Like, Scott, can you, like, what is that? What is it?
Yeah, I think there's a reality where we have to actually figure out the answer to that question. We know it's happening. We know that in our bases, in our communities, in our friend groups, in our home churches, there seems to be some sort of movement related around, well, at least in my experience, related around the term, perhaps, deconstruction. And it is a very nuanced subject, but it relates to the process in which individuals may go through, in which they begin to heavily doubt their inherited beliefs in relationship to their faith. And it can result in really desperate times. Doubt becomes a very big word for a lot of people going through this process. But it doesn't always result in people losing their faith. It can also result in people like myself who found a richer avenue for my faith and reconstructed after my own season of deconstruction.
You already said like, hey, you have a experience with this yourself. We'll go there in a minute. I know that, but like, first of all, do we? Because we talk about this now. Apparently, this is a relevant topic, but is it actually true that more people now go through a process of deconstructing their faith compared to, say, some decades ago? Or how is this? And is this happening, you guys think, within YM as well? Because we're YM leaders, so that's kind of important, I think. Or can it happen in YM? Wilrens, what do you think? Do you hear about it more now?
I know that for North America, there's really hard research that proves that there is a significant movement of young people away from the church, the evangelical church, at a scope that I think is new. Of course, it's not new for people to question their faith or even to renounce their faith. We can find people like that in all ages. But the scope of it and the fact that we have a name for it, that it sort of now has become a movement, or that suggests something, that there's I think the dimension of it is different from what we've had in the past.
But like, how does this come? Like, why now all of a sudden do you think like we see more people going through such a process?
Well, there can't be a single factor. There must be a number of things coming together. But I think the internet is one. Information is very accessible. So it's very easy for someone to find out about views or criticism of Christianity that would have taken a lot more effort even 20 or 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of negative news related to Christianity. I mean, child abuse in the Catholic Church, that affects us too, because in the perception of people, that's Christians doing it, and it is. So if that part of the face of Christianity, then that undermines our credibility as well.
So basically, if they label that as Christian, then I want to stay away from that, basically, to make it simple.
But it certainly doesn't give you confidence or conveys trust. And a number of other issues. Once you it's any sort of negative thing that happens with Christianity. Look at it this way: the Catholic Church, child abuse is nothing new, but the Catholic Church could keep it undercover. Mm-hmm. But it can't do that anymore. Yeah. But that's true for a lot of other negative things as well. We can't hide anymore to the extent that we could hide negative things in the past.
But is that a bad thing?
No, it's not. But some of the consequence of it is
that people doubt. Then, like, do I want to be part of this? People, this tribe.
How about Christian racism? I think the perception of especially evangelical Christianity of people have is fairly negative. What are evangelical known for? For all the things they are against abortion, against gays, against what else are we against? Against science. The perceptions aren't necessarily all the way true, but that is the image that we've sort of brought across.
Yeah.
We're judgmental.
And then,
we're narrow-minded.
and that makes then that people wonder, like, do I want to be
Yeah, would you really want
identified
to?
with
Would
that?
you really want to be part of that?
Yeah.
I see forms of Christianity and forms of evangelical church where I would run for the exit if that were my environment.
Yes. So like then you they basically say like, hey, I see this happening, and that's also labeled as Christian. I identify as Christian, and I don't want to be identified with that. But then, does that mean that they then renounce their faith, or that they does that mean that they go through a doubt or whatsoever, or how does that work? Like Scott, what makes the people question their faith, basically?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned, I think the moral failures of Christian church obviously is beyond the Catholic world, which I know that's not what you were saying. You know, but that's not all there is. For me, actually, my deconstruction was rooted in finding a better truth that questioned my inherited beliefs. Something like it was like finding a pair of shoes that fit my feet better, but the implications required me to go through a process. So it had nothing to do with my reaction to the world or reaction to moral failures, but my exposure to a richer and maybe more historic Christianity, which required me to question my inherited beliefs that were too small.
So can you take us a little bit in your story? Like at a certain time
I was born, no.
All right, we don't have all the time. No. But like at a certain time, like was there a season where you think like, do I belong, or do I fit, or do I actually believe this, or what happens that you question your faith?
I think so. As I said, I just ran into a new way of thinking, really, and I started reading. Really, I mean, my deconstruction journey was one of vigorous reading, asking a question about what about violence? What about the violence of the Old Testament? What about, I can go on and on. But ultimately, in the midst of that, I'm also staffing and leading DTSs. In the midst of that, I'm seeing God move in reality, in community, which I think if I didn't have that, I don't know where I would be in my faith. I had a leader who also went through their journey of deconstruction, and I found some kinship and some belonging in the midst of that. But also, you know, I think there were times where my peers didn't understand my process. That was a really painful situation for me. There were times where I remember actually being here for a WISE gathering, and I'm questioning everything. I'm questioning the validity of intercession. I'm questioning the charismatic world in general, which of course I'm in the right mission for this. I'm walking in a WISE gathering here, and there's probably some people who were there in the tent. It was like 6 a.m. and they're doing all this intercession with drums, and I'm like, that's not for me. And then God spoke, and he said, can you call them brother? And I said, I can do that. And then it felt like I can still stay in YWAM. I might not be the one at 6 a.m. beating the drum, praying. I still have beliefs in intercession, but those things needed to grow after they had to fall apart in some way, for me.
So basically, because like, just if you're honest, because
if I'm honest,
yeah, because these guys were beating the drums, like you think, like it makes you wonder, like, is this really the place I belong to, or like, is this actually all for nothing, or what are the questions which are going on then in your mind at that time?
I think part of this process, while I had someone who had gone through it that I could speak to, I think there was a lack of proactive connection in the midst of that. So part of this process also had a lot of judgment in me, if I'm being honest. So part of it was also, not only do I maybe disagree with whatever the theology is that's informing this act, but that's also annoying at 6 a.m. and I want to kind of judge you, which God would which God convicted me of, you know. So I don't know if that's answering your question. Ask your question one more time.
Yeah. So like, what were the exact things which you think like?
Well, even the validity of YWAM. Is missions right? Is missions the true expression of is this a real expression of the body of Christ? As in, is this really what Jesus had in mind when he said the Great Commission, for instance? You know, these types of things. And I don't know the answer to that question perfectly, but I know that in the midst of the journey, God called me back into my work in YWAM and reinvigorated me. So it was a relational journey. Even in the midst of my deepest of doubts, the fact that I was within community created a lot of positive frameworks for my reconstruction.
So it was basically relation which kept you basically connected and or.
I think part of it also is that for my journey, I found a God that looks like Jesus, and that invigorated me.
Yeah.
And I also got to see people, when I shared that image of God that looks like Jesus, which I know we all agree with, but then do we actually? I see them invigorated and liberated by that truth. And I'm passionate about that. And where else can I do that? Well, there's DTSs. Yeah. There's my leadership structures. And there's the way I treat the people on my base. If it's reflected out of that, then it's worth my time.
Yeah, yeah.
And that term liberation is a key one for me. It was liberating to find a God that looks like Jesus. And I see it's liberating when I can help people to see that as well. But in doing that, it requires some inherited beliefs to fall off. Yeah. That's my journey, but that's not everyone's journey.
No, exactly. Yeah. So there are different journeys where people go through. So what we do in the meantime, Jonathan here, he will go around with a mic. If you have a question to these guys on the couch, raise up your hand. Jonathan will come to you. Again, not all questions are right for the time, but like we start here. Yeah. Can you also, when you stand up, can you just share who you are? Share your name and share your question.
I'm Rob and I'm from Derby.
All right.
My question is, how do we help young people come into DTS? How do we as leaders help people may have more liberal views or some who may have more traditional evangelical views? How as leaders should we approach these things and help young people? Is submission the answer, or should we be looking to allow a lot of questioning of our leadership? And how do we do this?
All right, that's a very good question. So how do we deal with those people coming from all the range of Christianity, basically, from the very liberal side now, like to very traditional? Rodens, can you maybe?
Is that really new? And isn't YWAM a broad, open Christian? There are limits. There is something there, but we've always been interdenominational and open to. That's not why we're necessarily why we're here to define the fine points of atonement theory.
Yeah.
For instance. Well, I have an opinion on it, but
no, but to make it more concrete, say if we have like somebody coming in with a complete different view upon like creation, like they discover that I always have believed in a 6-day creation, but not anymore right now. I can imagine that will be for that person quite something like, oh, you know, like if I don't believe that anymore, or if I start doubting that, how can I make sure that the whole Bible is actually accurate and true and stuff like that? Like, how do we deal with these things?
I think actually I have a funny story. It's not funny, it's actually quite sad. I have a story about this.
Tell us your funny sad story.
I was leading an outreach, and another leader from another base was also there. This is in Rwanda, but this leader was from Europe. And one of my students was asking that very question about the validity of the 6-day creation story, and is it a science book or whatever. And this leader said, well, if you question that, then there's no point in you being in missions. You know, essentially being like, if you're going to question the Bible on these things, this is what he said. Actually, it's all coming back to me. From that foundation, we have the we have the
hold your horses.
This is where we have the where our foundation of our understanding of authority comes from. It's from Genesis, right? Instead of Jesus saying, I've given you the authority, that's enough in my book. No, we have to root it in the understanding of Genesis. So if you question that, then you should question any bit of authority that you have here, right? And again, he's a student, you know. He's now doing theology and he's an incredible thinker. But that could have been a moment that, well, then I don't belong.
Yeah. So it could be a moment there where somebody would say like, well, then I have to say goodbye, maybe.
And he's not in YWAM. And maybe he would have blessed our mission if he didn't have those situations, you know?
Yeah.
But then again, how do we respond? Sorry, like I was interrupting you. Like you had something to add here.
Yeah. I think this is a very narrow perspective on what it means to be an evangelical, and it is a big reason why for one of the bigger reasons why young evangelicals are leaving the church, because either they can't believe that anymore, or they find this too narrow. The fact of the matter is that evangelicals have a wide spectrum of opinions on this, and as YWAM, I don't think we need to pin ourselves on one of these options. It doesn't matter if you're. We're here because we want to follow Jesus and share that with others. What you believe about the 6 days in Genesis, we can talk about it. It's interesting, but it's...
Yeah, but Wildens, now I'm playing that guys as leader, right? Like, so if you say like, hey, the 6-day creation, you know, like we can think different about it. That's all okay. What about other things then? What about like, what are the things which are non-negotiable? What are then the things which we say like, these should always remain? Because if we doubt one, where's the line?
Well, we have different opinions on a lot of.
I'm not saying, by the way, that I view this like that. I'm just
you
playing
are.
it out. Like,
This is personal now.
Sorry,
I can see it.
I told these guys on forum, it's okay if we disagree, but like, no, kidding. Well, it is, but like, no, but seriously, what are the things where we say like, well, but these are the non-negotiables, or these should stay, or these core beliefs are that important to us that, yeah, because maybe then you don't believe in a 6-day creation, but like, can it happen? What about if I don't believe, for example, in that Jesus actually died on the cross, but it's more like a metaphor? Or where does it stop? So, Wildens, what do you think here?
Well, maybe it would be interesting to hear your drama. Okay, but I'll go first. Jesus. The oldest confessions of the church were part of a tradition. In the first few centuries of the church, certain issues were worked through. If you don't want to believe that, then the question, then I don't see how why would you be part of this? Why would you? Then you're not a Christian.
So what do you mean with these confessions, like the Apostles' Creed, or like?
That's the first one. Yes, definitely.
If you don't know what it is, by the way, Google it.
Yeah, you should have a look at it then. So when there's that's why the core identity, the core beliefs of Christianity were sort of formulated, discussed. I think if you don't want to be part of that tradition, then you don't want to be a Christian.
You have something to add there, Scott?
I think one of the things that you've said, which I think is, again, I don't think this is what you think, but essentially I think YWAM has transcended being a purely evangelical population within YWAM. And in reality, being interdenominational really beckons the question as to what that means. Our base has always strived to be ecumenical, which is, it was during the LTS this past school when, they said essentially that interdenominational doesn't make sense in the Catholic world. So it's not a very helpful term, even, but ecumenical is. So if YWAM is bigger than that, then our leaders need to be aware that there is a wide scope of belief. And I actually ultimately agree with the ideas that you're bringing about the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, these things that are fundamental to Christianity. I think what I would like to say is people are in journey and people are in process.
Because I can imagine that at a certain time that even young people say like, well, I talked about like the drones about a triune God. For some young people, for myself, sometimes very hard to grasp, right? Sometimes even easier to maybe neglect or leave behind. Can we not just talk about one God? And of course there are certain core things, but like, am I welcome while I struggle?
I think that would be my encouragement, is journey with people, be Jesus to them. And the grace that you exhibit will dignify them in the midst of, actually it would be a great time to throw up the slide. I have one slide.
Yeah, we'll get to some more questions, by the way. Yeah. But there's this one slide Scott wanted to show.
So yeah. I can't see it, but I've seen it a few times. Right here you see often a common pattern. So those of you who've gone through deconstruction in your journey may immediately relate to this. Those of you who haven't gone through that season of deconstruction are just learning about something, and that's okay too. On the far right, you have the moment in which an inherited belief is challenged.
Far left for the people, I
think it's far right.
For you. Far left for the crowd.
Yeah. Whatever. On one point, you enter then into a level of shock. For instance, a great one that's unrelated to Christianity, America's the greatest country in the world. That's an inherited belief, right? Then yes, I understand that's an American inherited belief. However, once Americans realize that might not be true, they actually go through a moment of shock, maybe, and then shame and guilt and anger. Why does my country think that about itself? Okay, and then actually they grow into maybe embracing America even though it's broken. Okay, and that's on the other side of that valley. Now, the deepest parts of these valleys, when we're in YWAM, when we're Christians, our inherited beliefs are not just about nationalism, but it's about our very being, our very creation, our very significance. And when those things are challenged, that is really scary. And that level of loneliness is real. And that it can go to that depth of depression. My hope, my question that I'm reflecting on, can we build a bridge across that valley as our communities? Can our leaders build a bridge across that valley? Now, we can't stop people from going through the process that they will go through. We can take that off the screen. We can't stop people's journeys, but maybe we can help the bridge on some of those spaces. And the way to do that is embracing people, not quickly telling them, well, you don't believe in Christian doctrine. It still might be true, but truth must be spoken in love or else it's unbearable. And the process of relationship in the midst of that, to me, is what I hope for YWAM.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's quite beautiful said, Scott. Thanks.
Yes, over here,
Questions?
Stefan.
Yes. Please stand up, say your
Yes.
name, and ask a question.
So my name is David. I'm American.
Hi, David, the American.
And I'm just curious if either of you or if anyone knows who coined the term deconstruction of faith. Where does that come from? What was their thinking behind it? What is the difference between a journey of deconstructing our faith to a journey of being renewed in our mind by the transforming of the Holy Spirit to discover what is good and pleasing and perfect? And would it be better as a church or as a mission to label the journey someone's on as that, as opposed to, at least for me, deconstruction sounds like construction is building up, deconstruction seems to be tearing down. But I just wonder if people are on this journey of renewing their minds, which is a good and a positive thing, but maybe we're using a term, and I don't know where the term came from, but maybe the term already starts them on a negative process.
Thank you, David, for the question. It's a good question because we did talk about this on forehand a little bit over dinner just now.
This is all pre-rehearsed.
Yes, all pre. It's all a setup, guys.
He was a plant.
To ask that question.
So, Lawrence, you have some thoughts about this? This term.
Yes, I feel the same way. Deconstruction is a negative term. It means breaking down, tearing something apart. I don't think that it won't be my term or my word. If someone comes to me with that term, I won't argue over words. That's fine. I don't like the term. Where it comes from, I think there's a blogger who's there's a blogger who's no longer a Christian. He went through this and he coined the term based on Jacques Derrida, the French philosopher. But I think a word like that, you can't control it. It has its own life. There's a French philosophy behind it that hardly anyone understands, including me, which is more subtle than just the idea of deconstruction. But I think in normal usage, that nuance is lost, and it becomes a bit too much. I would prefer something like reassess or even question. At least is neutral. Reassess, reevaluate, rethink, reimagine, whatever. Those are the words I
You
would
would prefer.
use.
Yeah. We also talked about but Scott, you did like actually, or like is maybe a bad word, but yeah, you like the term maybe. Can I say it like that?
Yeah, I don't know if I like the term. Actually, I would say there is a difference, genuinely. One is done, it's storming at times in relationship with God, but there's a clear sense that you're doing it with God. Renewal of the mind. I believe that, you know? I believe my journey of that was a process, but it's hard to call it that when you're doubting God's existence at times. And it's not the same thing. And for me, actually, deconstruction's too cute. It's kind of like you're unbuilding your Lego set. For me, it was my earth shattered below me and wanted to swallow me up. Doubt became haunting every corner of my mind, and then became a friend, and then became an ally. So it's not the same thing as discipleship. It's not that I think even thinking about I was reminded of Paul, the apostle. He had years in which he's reconfiguring what the heck is going on in him. And I can't imagine what it was like to go from believing for a militant Messiah into, to a reigning Jewish state versus, and versus what we have in the kingdom, which is a nonviolent Messiah. Hallelujah. Okay, so I'm just throwing things in there for the spiciness.
Yeah, like I heard some terms coming by.
So anyways, I don't want to lose the track. So ultimately, I love that process exists. I want that for my children one day. I want that for my staff. But I also know some of us enter a dark night of the soul, and that is different. The term deconstruction, I could care less. That's what it's going to be called. And for us to try to retool that word misses the point of the depths in which people going through that may be reaching.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. Maybe this is a good moment before we go to the next question. Jonathan, I see your thing. Yeah. We also, like, does everybody, it almost sounds like everybody goes through this or sometime will go through this or whatsoever, which I don't think is true. And is that even desirable? And et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts about that?
I don't think it's true. I don't think deconstruction is necessary unless it is. And what I mean by that is, for me, if I didn't go down, I couldn't go up. Okay? If I didn't go deep, I would have gone out. And so for me, in the way my mind works, call it fate, call it design, I don't know why. But I've also known, a great example of this is I saw, part of my journey was all theologically focused, big terms, blah, 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 blah. And then I remember hearing a speaker, and he did this whole big theological, beautiful thing, da, da, da. And then a lady stood up, and she said, I don't really get anything you just said, but I love Jesus, and I love my neighbor. And that speaker said, hallelujah, that's all you need. And I genuinely believe that. And if you don't need to go there, then you don't need to go there, but your friends might. And my hope is that we're not afraid when our friends might.
But to make it a little bit more personal, even Scott, here, so I grew up in a church where I was taught a 6-day creation, and where I was taught that that there will be, how to call that, like an opname, come on guys. Yeah, a rapture one day, like a rapture, and then like after 7 years of tribulation, Jesus would come back, and then it would be 1,000 years, and end time church, big time. I actually very much, I'm just gonna say it. I don't believe in a rapture anymore. Sorry for those who do.
You don't belong in YWAM.
But I didn't feel, and also 6-day creation is something where I'm a little bit like, but it's also not that important to me that I feel like that I go through a whole depression or whatever you all felt there. Should I worry?
No.
No.
No, I don't think if that valley isn't ahead of you that you feel you must go, then I think one of the issues, and pointing to the last question about the labeling, one of the issues with deconstruction is its marketability. And there's industries being built around it. And that is unsightly. Because for me, the process was not only personal, it was also sacred as I look back on it. And to make an industry about it will invite people into that process who have no interest, who have no need for it. So I don't necessarily think all Christians must. I do think we all go through processes of unlearning, relearning, and that's discipleship, right?
And I think the difference is that those issues were not central. They weren't at the heart of your faith, and they didn't make you question the Bible, Jesus, and everything else. But if the issues you start questioning and doubting take you to the very center and the very foundation of faith, then your whole worldview breaks down over your head and under your feet, and then it becomes an existential.
Then it's another
question.
thing. Yeah.
That's a totally different experience.
Yeah, I get it. All right, I think we have another question. Jonathan?
Yes, over here.
We
Hi.
can't see you, they can't see you, so maybe you want to move a little bit?
Yes.
Yes.
So my name is Philippus, and I have a little bit more of a practical question. When we have young people coming to a DTS, or maybe there's a YM staff, and then he goes into a process like that. People in a DTS, or a YM staff might maybe do a Bible school or some other school to find some orientation, but our programs are packed. When they go on outreach and suddenly it hits them, like, what do you do with a situation like that? How do you best do that? And from my own experience, when I did my Bible school, a lot of my questions, there was basically no room for that. If somebody is on your base, Scott, he might be lucky, because you went through that process and maybe some others on the base, and so there's much more of a room for that. But I think in many of our schools, we are not equipped in that sense. So what is a good way? How can we deal with it, and how can we help people on that road?
So how can we help people who are in the journey in a very busy season like a DTS, or people who come in on our locations? Next to prayer for them, like I pray for them and whatsoever. Okay.
People want to be seen. People want to know that their processes are okay. That they will not be rejected because of their questions. And I think to answer that question, part of it is that we have times like this in which everyone in this room, hopefully, if they're not screaming in their minds, this is heresy, get this guy off the stage, they're thinking, oh, there's more to this story. And I believe in the leaders of YWAM who care about people. And now if they're able to expand upon what is allowed within the YWAM thinking, maybe they can see those moments as, oh, this is one of those times in which I need to pause the schedule for this person, show them that I'm here for them, show them that as they go through their journey, they are not going to be judged. You may find with people in their journey that YWAM isn't going to be their spiritual home, and that's also okay. But let that be a choice out of journey with people that love and care for them versus exit by, that's my only choice because I don't belong.
So just to add, so you said don't kick them out immediately. I hear that.
Which no one would do.
But no one would do, hopefully. Yet on the other hand, should it be a goal to keep them with us all the time, or?
I would say if people are in journey, so there's no, or maybe there needs to be written one, a handbook, but ultimately some people are dealing with anxiety in the midst of this. So how would you deal with a student with anxiety? Some people are dealing with depression in the midst of this. Well, how are you dealing with that, right? So each person is going to have a different reality that they're working with and working through. But for me, the common thread is knowing that you belong. Knowing that you belong without a shadow of a doubt, insofar as you can. Of course, YWAM has a container. We're not completely nothing. We are a Christian movement, for instance. But even in the midst of that, can people belong to... Let's move it beyond YWAM. Can people belong to me as a person, even when their faith might leave them? Can I be a person who dignifies someone whose faith might be shattered by still recognizing them as individuals in a journey that are loved? And I think if we have the bandwidth and the antennas up for that, that will save so many people's pain of an already painful journey.
Right. Thanks. Hulrons, do you have some thoughts on that same question? So say people...
Well, I believe we need to learn or be able to say, I don't know, or I'm not sure. and create that space where it's safe, so there's room and time for someone to work through their process. But I think what really doesn't help is to come with false certainty or formula answers. Let's face it, people will come up with issues where we just don't have the expertise. And I think to say, well, I don't know, or I'm not sure about what's the answer to that question, is especially in our schools, a Bible school, where very specific questions may come up. Let's be honest, we don't have the answer to everything.
But I could imagine being a school leader of a DTS, that at a certain time, if students are in a phase where, or if a student is in a phase where he cannot attend any class or whatsoever because it's just not there, is then DTS at that moment the best choice for this guy or this girl?
Yeah, I would say if they can't, I think we have, like I said, we have a container, you know. Perhaps not. Perhaps the DTS program isn't the right place for them to go through this journey.
But perhaps it could also be.
Perhaps so.
So there's no
It's almost like
standards.
there's a being out there who might give wisdom to these situations. I don't know.
Man.
I don't know,
Like
but there's something that might be able to discern with. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows?
Discernment might help in a situation like that.
All right, Jonathan, do you have...
Yes, Alex. Yes, so I'm Alex from Northern Ireland, and it's not really a question. I just wanted to kind of comment a little bit, kind of almost add on, because I think I'd like to say the context is everything. Where you're from, what you grew up with, you know, the church background. You know, so even for me, coming from Northern Ireland, and I can relate so much to Scott in this, but, you know, the term deconstruction, it's admitting that not every church has perfect beliefs and practices. And I think depending on how bad it was, or like maybe how toxic the church culture was, or maybe how wayward some theologies were, then you're going to have more need for deconstruction. And you might like that term more because, you know, if you've got a very sort of heavy leaning church in one direction, maybe you might at some point realize on the other side of the road, you like things better. You know, there's some things that they do better, and, you know, maybe your beliefs might grow as you kind of unpack and, you know, maybe go down some of the rabbit trails, and some you might stick and some might not. But I just sort of feel like, you know, maybe it kind of goes back to that other question, but sometimes people might not need a lot of deconstruction, but other times, you know, people do. And, you know, coming from Northern Ireland, I think there is a real need for deconstruction, you know, because of the polarization in our society, the religious conflict, and religion has often been a big negative impact on, you know, society. So, you know, in societies like that, I think it's much more relevant than maybe some society where the church is pretty healthy.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I think indeed, like, context does matter, big time. Yes.
Can I say just something quickly to that? Which was, during my journey of deconstruction, I was dating my now wife, and I remember reading these books and being like, you know, I won't even say what it was, but I was like, what if God didn't da-da-da-da-da? And she'd always just be like, yeah, like, I kind of never thought that anyways. I was like, how is this not revolutionary to you? You know, and you look at the health of her church, and it wasn't a church that is, anyways, it was a healthy church that's relational, in which what bound them wasn't just, we must have the truth, but love.
That's beautiful. We go to the last question, and then I want to close off. I have the privilege of the final question for you guys. So.
Okay, thank you. My name's Sue Pratt, I have a question and a comment in response to when you were talking about DTS students and their journeys. Just wanted to give an example. So I worked with the DTS in Lausanne a number of years ago, and we had an outreach team that went to Israel. And on that outreach team, there was a young Canadian woman who had been brought up in a Christian home and come to do a DTS, quite young, only about 18. And then she went on outreach to Israel. And in Israel, she encountered a lot of unbelief in Jesus. And she came back from the outreach and she said to me in the debriefing week that she'd lost her faith in Jesus. And I'm thinking, this girl has done a really good DTS. She paid her fees. She did her homework. She came to class. She was cooperative. She did everything a good DTS student did. She was a great team member. And she came back and she said she'd lost her faith in Jesus. And I thought, well, shall I fail her or not? And
Was that the question?
And anyway, we prayed about it as a staff team, and we passed her. So she passed the GTS, and I listened to her. I had some time with her and prayed for her, and off she went. She passed her DTS, not knowing if she believed in Jesus or not. And then, lo and behold, next year she came back and did an SBS. And guess what? On the SBS, she gave her heart to Jesus. She was radically changed by studying the Bible in depth and found the faith for herself that wasn't her parents' faith. And it was incredible. It was wonderful to hear it. So my question to you as leaders is, what gives you hope that you can pass on?
I think that's actually a very beautiful question. So, yeah, what gives you hope? Because also some of our stories here can sound a little bit like depressing almost. Scott?
Want me to answer this? Would you like me to answer this one?
Yeah. No, seriously. No, but
Yeah.
I think it's a good question because
That's a great question.
Yeah, because like what does gives us hope?
My faith, my journey of deconstruction was a journey that what once was certainty in my interpretation of Scripture as the linchpin of my faith, I lost. And what I found was a faith in a person, in a Father and in a Son and the Holy Spirit, who then leads me back to truth, who then led me back to Scripture. So, what gives me hope? Who gives me hope? I genuinely believe God cares for these people more than I do. And I genuinely believe that our journeys are long and we don't know what's going to happen. But I know that God loves these people, and I have to let go of my control over their journey, entrusting them to God, who is real, who is a person who cares.
Wow. Can I summarize it like that? Who gives us hope, or what gives us hope, is like that God is bigger than our own theology boxes. Basically.
Absolutely. I could talk about that all day. You know, God.
I know.
I know. Our theological boxes are language. Language does not touch the untouchable God. It's just trying to get there. God is huge. He's big. The Zulu word is Nkulu, the big. It's bigger than big. And he is love, right? So if God is love, there's something in me that has enough hope to not control people's journeys, and to allow them and God to have even the discourse of quiet, trusting in God, ultimately. Being a friend, being present, being loving, but ultimately not controlling their journeys, but trusting God with them.
Thanks. Wildens, what gives you hope?
I can't add anything to that to improve on it. I totally agree.
Can I then close up with like my final question? We're all here leaders. Like, we have people coming into our location, students, staff. Like, if we don't face this, we might face this in the coming year. Name some do's and don'ts. And you named already quite some, but like, what are some do's and don'ts if I have some staff coming to me say, actually, I seriously doubt my faith?
Well, here's what not to do. I know exactly what you're going through. This is what you must do.
And then this
That's
is the repenting. You should repent, confess your sin.
You know that verse, you know.
Whatever solution you then think you can come up with. But I think we need to listen. That's sometimes hard for us, especially as leaders, to listen and not think that we have to come up with a comment, an explanation, an answer, and even less with the solution. We don't have to fix this. We can't anyway.
That's a good
Just-
one. Yeah. Scott?
I actually read this question out. I forget who was there with me, and they said, well, "Don't give up." And I thought that was a great response. You know, what should you not do with these people? Don't just give up. You know, I think that's important. I think another do, if you feel out of your depths, and if I'm saying stuff that you know other people in your networks, you hear the whisperings of similar thoughts, but you've not gone there yourself, go ask for help. Go find my email if I'm the only one you can think of, but I surely am not the only one in your
Scott
community.
Sotomayer at Rijmerostreffen.com.
No, just the last name. Thank you. But no, find help. You know, if you can tell that person, I love you, I'm with you, I want you to know that you belong. And if you feel inspired by the Lord to say this, you can say, I want to see where I can serve you in this journey. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to talk to a few people and resource this journey with you, you know, and reach out for help, because none of us are alone. We're here interconnected. And I guarantee you, you know, there are many people in the crowd. Just to say, can I ask that question? Can you raise your hand if you feel like you've gone through a journey of deconstruction or are in it right now? Okay, obviously. So it's like a third of the room, okay? I did this at the Wise Gathering. It seemed like more than half, you know? And I think we have to recognize, again, going back to the core thing here, we're not alone. And there are resources out there that can help you. See the person as a person, not as the project to fix and to control in that sense, yeah.
Beautiful, thanks. Can we give a hand to these guys? So we're slightly running a bit late, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna do this again, but then with another topic. So Scott is gonna take my place. I'm gonna give this mic over to Scott now. Also, Jonathan, could you do this again later? So save up questions in the beginning a bit, and then when Scott will tell you, then we can ask questions. So Scott, yes, let's stand up first, stretch a bit.
It's less of a hot topic, so I don't think as many questions will rise.
And also,
Well done, guys. That was really, I think it was excellent. Tell people who are also really intense. Oh, great to work with you. Let's talk after, because we need to probably start the next section.
so even if it will be 8:45 where we finish, it's fine, you know.
Okay.
Of course, let's feel a little bit like how
Yeah.
engaging.
Yeah. Okay, everyone, take your seats, please. I'm sorry. As you just take your seats, hey Dennis. In hindsight, take your seats. Thank you. So in hindsight, I'm realizing probably should have done my bit earlier in case I've offended a few people, I don't know. And then you're like, whatever this is gonna be, it's ridiculous, but we're gonna power through. So as we were processing, I'm just gonna power through the noise here, even though there's a few chatter. We like to be relational in YWAM. Oh, thank you for turning me up. As we were processing what our second couch session should be, we had a few options on the table, but what felt right was, in me, the question of monoculturalism in YWAM, okay? So we know in YWAM we celebrate the nations. We love, guys, can we just finally bring our discussions to a close? Thank you. I tolerated it enough, okay? I tried my best. I believed the best in you, and I was wrong. So, we love being a diverse mission. We love that we have missionaries from everywhere. We love that we have bases everywhere. In our foundational values, we have definition being an international mission. But the question I have and that we're going to explore is how good are we at truly embracing and including the nations into our cultures and our community cultures. So the term monoculturalism is defined as the practice of maintaining, I'll read this really slowly, the practice of maintaining in a society, or in our case a community, a single culture, suppressing subcultures of, for instance, minority groups, or in other words, excluding external influences. So, in YWAM, do we struggle with this? I would add to this definition, it's not just an active suppression of external influences, but the lack of elevation and the lack of inclusion within YWAM of external cultures. So, I'm going to invite up two seasoned leaders, one Damaris from Brazil, who works here in Harpenden, and the other one, Emmanuel Enti from Ghana, working both in Luton and internationally. Have a seats. So, yeah, I'm excited for this discussion. So, for both of you, how does that definition of monoculturalism ring for you personally in your experiences in YWAM? Maybe starting with Emmanuel.
I'll tell a story.
As a good African.
As a good African. About 2 years ago, we had a very challenging situation around the globe. Now, we were praying for revival, and in May, we had an event called Black Lives Matter. Can you hear a pin drop? I've never experienced racism before, ever. My wife has never, but we had that event. And whilst I don't agree with a lot of the narrative of that particular organization, Bishop Emmanuel Katangali, who is a bishop of Uganda, who's written a book called A Mirror to the Church. It's a very good book to explore. He spoke out and he said, this whole situation is a mirror to the church and how we've dealt with the other. And I think that when we talk about monoculturalism in the context of our mission, really we're going to have to challenge ourselves to see, ask the question, how do we view the imago Dei in the other who is not necessarily and distinctively part of our culture? Because this imago Dei, who might belong to the other culture, is beautiful and carries certain intrinsic, powerful attributes of God that we actually can be blessed with and benefit from. And if we don't see that this other belonging to belonging to other cultures, then we might actually really miss out on all the attributes that is embedded in the other. Now, therefore, it's a sad day when in spaces within our mission, we don't really celebrate intentionally the other as belonging from other cultures.
Yes. However, we love to celebrate the nations, Damaris. We love celebrating that you're Brazilian. We love the feijoada, right?
Did you like the feijoada today, guys?
I love the feijoada.
Good.
Okay, so tell us more, as Emmanuel said.
I think we love to celebrate the nations, but sometimes I feel very labeled in being Brazilian. It's like, remember once I went to Switzerland and I was in this family church gathering and they decided to play football, and straight away they were fighting to see who would have me in their team, assuming that I could play football. Never play football in my life. So it's just those kind of assumption that because we are from some nations, we know how to dance, we know how to celebrate, we know how to play football, but that we have no brain. And that is the hardest part for me, basically, because I've been in situations where people just looking at me as this short lady, lively and bubbly, but sometimes they don't stop to see or to hear what I have to say. And also, because of my accent, sometimes people think that maybe that is not enough knowledge there. And that's, again, I just want to say that those things are impressions, not necessarily truth. But that's how I felt a few times. Not only here in Europe, even in Brazil when I had to translate, or I was in a leadership where I was the only Brazilian in a YWAM base. So that's how I felt. Does that make, I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. And I would maybe ask a question related to that answer, which is, would you feel that there is an issue of, I'd call it novelization? You're saying, I've become a novelty as a Brazilian, right? I'm a fun thing. But actually, they don't love my brain. They don't seek me out internally. Would that be a common occurrence for you throughout your experience in YWAM? Any base, any space?
Yeah, and I have to say that it's my fault. I just want to bring that up in the context here. One of the things I had to learn while I was here in England especially was that I had to come and straight away establish what I know. And this is not cultural to me. In my culture, we don't do that. In our culture, at least in my, I don't know in Emmanuel, but in my culture, we always invited people to ask questions. And as you ask questions, you're going to be invited to speak. It took me years to have the courage to speak in areas that I knew I had a lot of knowledge. So that's a little bit of how I felt here.
So that speaks to one of the kind of points I feel is important to highlight. In your culture, you're saying, if I understand it correctly, that you must be invited to share on what you have. In my culture, and if anyone, as you just saw earlier, I can't stop talking, right? And right now, maybe. In my culture, I take that spotlight. In her culture, perhaps, it is given. So how does that play out on a scale in power structures, for instance? I want to add to that, Emmanuel, in relation to power structures within YWAM.
I think oftentimes we attribute the power to speaking. And oftentimes there is so much power in silence. When people come from a certain culture and they don't speak out, we attribute fear and insecurity to them, instead of actually gravitating towards them and embracing them for who they are. Now, if we attribute fear, insecurity, shyness, and all the synonyms to them, we might actually really reframe our understanding of their ability to perform. And how many of us haven't we seen a lot of people in our bases who probably did not speak a whole lot, but when you got to know them, they were incredible. When I first came, I've lived in the West, in Europe for about 30 years, and like the Marys, the first place I lived, automatically everyone thought I'm an African, therefore I'm a great dancer. I'm the worst dancer in the history of the entire African continent. I do not dance.
I do like dance, okay? I really do.
Exactly. My wife is pretty good and she dances for us. But I don't dance. I'm African. You know, so that gravitating towards a person, it just really getting to know, and that takes a lot of time. That process has a way of really attributing, empowering a person. In the process, I lose some of that my power.
In your journeys in the... Yeah, I think mine died. In your journeys in Europe, in your time here, what rules that are unspoken have you had to learn the hard way?
Can I answer that?
Yes.
One of the
While you're here.
one of the unspoken rules that I had to learn here, and I had to explain this not so long ago to my leadership here, is that we, at least Brazilians, when we are passionate, when we want to engage in a conversation, we interrupt each other, right? Do you know that? So we interrupt each other. And, but that's not because we're trying to be rude. It's because we're so engaged. Yes, 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 yes. And then, oh, no, I don't agree. But then it's okay. You can interrupt me back. But I realize here that that can be really bring lots of problems and misunderstanding to meetings. And I had to learn to hold on to my emotions, or to explain the other person, I'm so sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. So this is one of the unspoken very recently that I still have to explain even to my leadership group. Say, guys, if I'm interrupting you, it's because I'm engaging, okay? It's not because I'm trying to be rude or disagreeing.
Well, in my case, my first year in Europe, we went out. Friends invited us to go out. We all went out. We had a queue, and everyone was paying for themselves. Now, you all know what it is. In my context, if you invite me to go out, what do? Absolutely, Habibi. So if you invite me to go out, you pay for me. I invite you to go out, I pay for you, and I'm just right behind that queue in an expensive restaurant in Switzerland. And I'm watching everyone dishing out their card. First of all, I'm from Ghana. At the time, we didn't have a credit card. What am I going to do? I'm dead. So quickly, I had to learn that I'm in a very individualistic culture. Nothing, it's not judgment at all, but I quickly had to learn that I'm 30 years on, I'm still learning that. For those who are close to me, I'm as collectivist as I am. So there are advantages and disadvantages, but to learn to live in a highly individualistic culture, to deal with both the pros and the cons, for me, initially was very difficult.
I think one of the other things also that I had to understand here is that if the person don't have the time to talk in a moment that I am in crisis, that I really need it, does not mean that that person does not care for me. And what a really difficult question. I remember once it was at the beginning when I moved to England, and I had this situation. I was very, very hurt, and I needed to talk to someone. And then I found this person, and I said, can I just talk to you? And I was like, my tears was coming throughout my face. I really need someone to talk, and I need someone that can understand the culture here, and blah, 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 blah. And the person looked at me. I really want to talk to you, but I have another meeting now. Can we talk in the afternoon? And then I feel like, how am I going to uncry my tears Do you understand? In order to cry again in the afternoon. I didn't know how to do that. Anyway.
That's a really great point. And how many of us have been there, by the way? Let's just review when we've had people from other nations or other cultural contexts, and we've put them into a meeting slot when they're asking for relational support, you know, and these small things, you've been of the resilient, right? You've learned it the hard way and gotten through your time in Europe by going, okay, I'm going to trust that that person actually cares for me, even though it feels nothing like it. One of the kind of realities that I find in this issue of monoculturalism is we can understand that other cultures different from our own, and I'm speaking obviously from a Western cultured context, but you can apply it to yourself. We understand that other actions from other cultures are influenced by different values. So for instance, in Heidelberg, being on time is an important value. Why is it an important value? What's underpinning that value? Stefan.
Means you're reliable.
You're reliable. Yeah.
You're sound of character. You do what you say.
Sound of character.
You do what we agree to, right?
Right. So, and yeah, we agree to, you're honoring other people's time. How many of you've heard that, right? Yeah. Right. So, and then from a different orientation to time, what's the value?
Oh, I love that. It's the opposite for us, in a way, because if you're invited for a party, let's say social thing, so let's come. You come to my house and you're gonna have dinner. Emmanuel, you're gonna come and have dinner with me, and or I'm going to have dinner with Emmanuel. In my mind, I said, I'm not going to come on time because he probably will have some last-minute things that he needs to deal with. So I want to be kind enough to give him some time by coming maybe 10 minutes late. I'm honoring him as a person who is, a woman who is cooking like you did. I had a feijoada. I was in the kitchen today. So I had to go home, take a shower, get ready to be here. So it's the same concept. So it's honoring the person by giving the lady who was cooking to have a shower, put some perfume, and be ready to receive the guests. Isn't that nice?
Emmanuel, do you have another cultural orientation towards time? What values are underpinning that for your native culture at the very least?
I'll do time orientation as well. There are layers. There's so many layers. So my first in Switzerland, Swiss, 5-10 minutes ahead of time. I did strive. I tried. I'll be right on time. 9 o'clock, I'm there, and everyone is there, waiting. So on time, but I was late. And and I can tell you, for several months I was late, but I was on time. I think for us coming from a cultural value that is more, the emphasis was more on being present. So it's not about being on time. Yes. My honor of you was being present. Now, I can leave home. We scheduled to meet at 9. I can show up 9:45. But I came. I'm present. Yeah, I'm present. So you are sweating. You are absolutely upset. I'm not a man of integrity. Brother, I came. I'm present. Yeah, and guess what? It's thoroughly biblical in my view. So I think in our spaces, especially in Western context, the, cultural orientation is absolutely indispensable to enable people, as our YWMS who come into our bases to serve, not assuming that they'll quickly settle in, they'll understand. You're going to have to take time. It takes time. I've been in Europe for 30 years. I'm sometimes late. For those who know me. So it takes time, and you have to take time and just get people settled in.
I remember one day when one of my students here went to do work in school for a period of time, and then the lady who was working with him wrote me a message and say, "I'm so sorry, but your student, it's almost late every day." And I was like, I'm trying to understand what it's almost late. Because he came on time every day. For her, she could not rely that he would come because he was there at 9 o'clock when he was supposed to be there 15 minutes before 9.
So, and I think it's fun to talk about time and to, oh, we're so different, that's brilliant, right? Ultimately, what we end up doing in our communities is, that's so cute, but ours is the right way. That's our underlying thing often that people from other cultures might experience is, isn't this a fun time we're sharing? But as the leader, I'm still gonna hold you strictly to my value system and not spend the time and not share again and not have grace and not, actually, Emmanuel being late, maybe you don't even need to have grace for, because there is no clear sin in being late. Yet we feel like there is, right? So this is one small thing, but it's about so the question I have is, one question. Should our staff's native cultures play a role in shaping our community's cultures?
I think yes. I've been in many times the only non-Western in many different groups of leadership that I've been part of. And I believe the way for the native ones to help is by invitation. It's inviting us to speak, to give our opinion, spend time to know what we have to offer. Sometimes I feel that because there is always an expectation that, but is there anyone there that wants to say something? And then we expected that people will straight away stand up. But we don't work like this. I have to ask, hey, Dick, do you have anything to say? Hey, Laura, do you have anything to say? And then if she has, she will say, but because of relationship, we are very relational, we want to be invited by our names to speak. If that doesn't happen, we might never gonna speak and might gonna be quiet.
Everyone here who have lived overseas for a year, 2, 10 years, whatever, you know what it means, actually, just the challenges of living in another culture. The same thing is true when others come to us. Now, for our role, for me, it was very important to feel celebrated. It was very important to feel that I was genuinely celebrated and not tokenism, because it is so easy to be tokenistic.
Can you explain tokenism?
Yes. Awesome. Do you have a story around the tokenism? Tokenism basically is the idea that I sort of pampering a person to feel good because I just to soothe my guilt.
Yeah.
And it's easy to do that. It's really easy to do that. Yet to genuinely celebrate someone, you see that narrative all through the book of Acts. To genuinely celebrate someone is actually really to see them for who they are, to embrace them, to accord them the value, how God sees them, and to allow them to be not a guest, but to be a family. There are a lot of people who come to us already feel like a guest, but they want to be a family. And I think that the transitioning from being a guest, especially new staff coming, international new staff coming from wherever, into our bases, to transition from being a guest to a family requires us to celebrate people. And why when we do that brilliantly, in so many ways, we do that very well, I think that we still have quite a long way to go.
Shouldn't we just strive to have kingdom culture? Isn't that what we should forget our cultures and just strive for kingdom culture, don't you think?
I have a really hard time with this terminology. Because every time I hear kingdom culture, it's always much look like my own culture. And I have a question mark about what is kingdom culture, because most of the time when I hear, or in the context that I've been hearing about kingdom culture, it's just much more like the culture that the person, or it's much more like the dominant culture, or it's what I think it's right, or it's based on my own interpretation of what is kingdom culture. So I have a hard time to understand what is kingdom culture. Maybe you can help me.
I don't know why I'm getting the heat here.
When I think of kingdom culture, I think of the incarnation. In Zulu, South Africa, we have this beautiful word that to me encapsulates what a community is. Ubuntu. Can you try it? Ubuntu. Try it again. Ubuntu. Ubuntu basically means I am because you are. It means my value, my essence, who I am as a person is so intrinsically connected to you that my reflexes and what I do has a direct impact on you and vice versa. Now, Ubuntu within African culture really describes everything communal and community. When I read John 1:14, it says Jesus he became flesh and dwelt among us. To me, it's a kingdom culture. It's a kingdom culture because the process of becoming, it means that one actually loses a bit of themselves in order to become. Now, can you put that sort of, this individual gesture, God becoming human and moving towards us, and if we were to put that whole process in the context of our community in terms of becoming, what will that look like? How would our community look like? And for me, the incarnation is really a blueprint. It is a blueprint of transformational communities. It is a blueprint of transformational communities because it is really this God who decided to release power, basically let go of power to become in order for us to be lifted. And that is, to me, a kingdom culture. You see that in the book of Acts. You see that in the book of Acts, where one of my favorite in the book of Acts is, it says that there was a lot of miracles happening, and the grace of God was so mighty on them that there was not a single person in need. Acts 4:33, 34. How about that? Not a single person in need. Why? Because of the grace of God that was so strong on them. This is becoming.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Emmanuel. I think I have two more questions before we field questions from the crowd if we have time. One is, in your reflection, what are the effects of a possible monoculturalism issue? How does it affect the leadership in YWAM, the structures in YWAM? In your eyes?
So a possible effect of monoculturalism, to me, may lead to sameness and what I call similarities. Similarity means that you look like me. When I came to Europe, I thought this is where I belong because naturally my processes are very linear structure. That's how I think. And so here am I in a German part of Switzerland, and I loved it. I thrived. Now, in that context, it's easy for someone like me to really thrive because it's just predominantly it's it's same like I think. When it comes to the effects of monoculturalism, I think one of the effects is really sameness and similarities in that we have to be careful that through our recruiting strategies, we don't recruit people who look like us. Yeah, the way we think, the way we look. I'm not talking about race. I'm just talking about how we think. We're looking for a type of a persons. The other thing is the other effect to me is service. The impact of monoculturalism when it comes to service. Are we a top down or are we a bottom up? And the other impact is, to me, it's a strength. Are we looking for? Are we okay to welcome people who are vulnerable into our midst, or we always look for people who actually are strong? Yeah. And in the early years in YWAM, majority of our current leaders were really people who came from the margins. They were vulnerable people. They were not people who came with strength. They were people who came from the margins. And these are people who became our leaders and became transformational leaders. And perhaps we have to look at our recruiting strategies.
I think when I think about culture, I just want to clarify that I don't think about just non-Western and Western. Culture we're talking about has to be with generations. Has to do also being a woman or being a man. Being short or being tall, believe me. Yes.
It's not a joke. It really is.
It is a joke.
It's a reality.
Yeah, it's not, because when I go to a church, if I come, if I can see if I would be a tall lady, I would be accepted way easier. When I come as a short person to a church, that is also, do you really know what to speak? Do you really know what you're saying? Being a woman also, I was joking with him earlier that I was preaching in a church in London, in Southall Baptist Church in London, this last Sunday. And then I gave the word, and people came like, wow, this is a really nice word you gave. And then Paulo, my husband, was next to me, and the guy looked at him and said, and you were the driver, right? The Uber driver. And because he was my husband, it's like, and then the other person came to him like, must be hard for you to always drive your wife to preach in churches. People would never say that to me if it would be my husband preaching. So then it's good to understand when we're talking about culture, it's beyond than just being Western and non-Western. I like to joke, I like to play around, but it's way more. Being a mother, having children and have no children. Being able to facilitate for mothers to take leadership. Mothers to be leaders. It's not easy for us, and sometimes people do not understand what we have to sacrifice as mothers. Husbands to be able to give space to their wives to be leaders. Husbands who have a hard time to understand exactly what you said in terms of like, my wife has gifts, so I will release her. And wives to say, my husband has gifts, and I will release him. So I think culture, it's beyond this whole thing of hot culture, cold culture, non-Western and Western. Because when I went to Africa, to Senegal, I was there Western. And most of the YWAM bases I worked in some nations in Africa, they actually were led by Western, with a whole bunch of Africans that had to actually serve, which was so sad. And I had to question a lot of things. But on the other hand, also, I think we need to understand I don't need to change who I am because I'm here. I can't just be myself. Guys, I decided to sit here exactly like I sit in my house because I want to be myself.
Amen.
I'm talking here with my voice a little bit louder because I want to be myself. Most of the time, I speak like this because I know that as soon as I speak with lots of passion, I can lose credibility. This is hard, and this is not because I'm Brazilian. You know, but the thing is, I want us to be able to embrace and to celebrate who we are, not necessarily where we come from, which makes a big difference.
That's good. I think what Damaris, what you're bringing is such an important expansion to our ability to imagine new leaders, with imagining what our communities can be led by. Even just saying that thing about raising my voice, so many people have this implicit rule that to have a discussion, you have to be emotionless in order to be rational. And if you're being a bit more exuberant, then you are overly emotional, you're over the top, and you lose credibility. And these things are implicit in us, and you sharing your heart breaks those things open and helps us to reflect on, and going back to what Emmanuel's point is, if I'm not expanding on my idea of the fact that what values that influence my culture are not necessarily the right values, but just my origin, then I'm going to consistently replicate myself in my base. I'm going to consistently find people who are like me and elevate the cultures that are like mine, because I'm not awake to the idea that there's more out there. And I'll maybe like Damaris if she's a Western version or an English version of Damaris, and that's when she can take power. But before then, But before then, you have, you can have some cultural erasure within our bases. Manuel, you had something to say?
Oh, you go ahead, sir.
No, that's it. I mean, I have another question, but we're running out of time. So I think quickly, what inclusive practices could we try to implement in our communities in order to soothe the walls of monoculturalism that we can all carry?
Take risks. Take risk and welcome different accents.
Amen.
Sometimes it's hard for us to hear people with different accents. Sometimes it's hard for us to invite people with different accents to even teach in our DTSs. And they might be people with anointing that God wants to bring to your DTS. Take risks in inviting people who are young. We don't have enough young, really leaders teaching among us because we always want to replicate. Because just the experience. But when we started in YWAM, I started with 22 years old. The first time I went to teach in a DTS in Brazil, I was 24. Did not have a lot of experience. So let's just take risks and welcome different accents in your community.
Really great, well put. Emmanuel.
When Damaris was talking about taking risks, it just reminded me of how I came to YWAM. I came to YWAM because of a DTS team that came to Ghana 32 years ago. And the DTS team, average age was probably about 20, 21. It was from Mercy Ships, and we had a pastor's conference. A 19-year-old Fijian girl was teaching, and she had literally every single of the Assemblies of God church pastors at the edge of their seat. 19-year-old. I was a youth leader. I happened to be in the crowd, and I was on the edge of my seat. I couldn't believe it. And I want what these young people had. It was a very multicultural team. It was a team that really, really represented something that I want. Fast forward to our locations. I think we've taken a lot of, 30 years ago and now, we've made huge steps, and yeah, there's much to go. And I'll say this, because I do tend to travel around Europe and the States teaching, and I think that we've taken massive steps. But for me, celebration is huge. Take time to celebrate persons. And Tamara is saying, take rest, yeah? Take rest and celebrate. Let's celebrate persons. Be intentional about celebrating persons, families, individuals. Not just people coming from external, but celebrating persons who are just a culture of celebration. And that could include food, national food, for those of us who come from foodie cultures. It's big, we fellowship around food. But food, national celebrations, special days, families, get to know your family. We run a small community, and I've decided that every single one of my staff, we're not a big base, but every single one of my staff, I'll get to know something about their family. And I think I know every single one of their families. And it is very special to me. It allows me to feel that I can take time and connect with your families through prayer. And so celebration in every way, however we want to celebrate, let's take time and celebrate.
So good.
Yeah.
Thank you. It takes a lot of intentionality to do that. Oh, yeah. And that's be curious, perhaps, is the word as well. You need that curiosity that drives that intentionality. Round of applause for these two. Thank you guys very much.